Hey there, and welcome to Abyssal Painting. Today I am going to be painting Carnage, and this model was designed by Zez Studio. I'm not affiliated with them, but as always, I will put a link down below to their Patreon if you are interested in this particular model or any of their other works. I was really excited to paint this one. I've been looking forward to him for a little bit now, and he's really simple to paint, so this video is not going to be very long because he's red. So to start off, I am going to give him a zenithal highlight with some white ink, and I'm going to spray the entirety of the model, just creating some bright highlights and letting the black create some natural shadows. When I'm done, this is what I'm left with. I put a little more white on the edges of his blade pieces just to accentuate those. Now for our first color, I'm going to use this speed paint murder scene color, which is like a crimson mauve. I don't know what it is, but it makes for a really good undertone for the red that I'll be putting on top of it later. So I spray every single part in its entirety with this speed paint. You can already start to notice, because of that zenithal highlight, how it creates some natural shadows and highlights. And I really like the way this looks just starting off, but we're going to add some more reds just to really make him pop and look the way Carnage should. So for my next color, I'm going to use this burnt red, and we can consider that original mauve color that I used to be kind of like an undertone, as if we were doing skin tones. So my paints are always thinned, usually like a 2:1 or a 3:1 ratio, and then I slowly build them up. And with this first color, I'm going at about a 45-degree angle, and this is what you're left with. So you can see that red is starting to build up. It's starting to create some nice highlights and some nice contrast against the shadows and the high spots. And now I am going to take this Vallejo Nocturna color, and I am going to start spraying directly from above. I'm just taking my time, picking out any highlights or any areas that I really want to accentuate, again, like the edges of his blade pieces, the top of his head, up in his shoulders, and those muscly areas. I really want to make sure that they are popping and stand out. And when I'm done, this is what he is going to look like as far as his final red is concerned. For my final touch, and to make everything really pop, I'm going to take this Inferno Red, which is also a Vallejo Nocturna color, and I am going to dry brush over all of the texture, and there is a lot of texture on this model. And by doing this, it starts to tie all of those colors together and really just makes everything pop and really accentuates all of the detail that has been sculpted into this piece. You'll notice that I'm using a large makeup brush to do all of my dry brushing with this model. And the reason for that is I think makeup brushes leave a really nice soft kind of gradient when you use them versus natural hair dry brushes that you can buy for the hobby specifically. They all have utility, they all have merit, but with this particular model, because it has so much texture and because I don't really want to jam anything down into that darker red that I've already created, the makeup brush just does a really great job of picking out the highest parts without going too deep into the model and ruining a lot of that contrast that I tried to build up before. So just take your time, build it up. You can do multiple passes until you are happy with what you've got. All done with the dry brushing, I am now going to go ahead and start working on the base, and I need to reprime the base because I had the body sitting on there when I was doing the zenithal, and yeah, reprime it. And from there, I'm going to go in and paint the dirt. I'm going to start off with a black brown dry brush, and then I will use a dark umber or a light umber color to pick out all the edges and make it pop a little bit. When I come in with that umber color, I'm going from the top down. I'm not going from the bottom up because that will get rid of the shadows that I've tried to create here. So always go from the top down to preserve shadows and build contrast. Once I was done with that, I'm going to take this dark green brown and I'm going to go through and I'm going to dry brush along all of these roots that are running along the bottom of the base. After I'm done with that, I take this dark orange brown and I am going to pick out all the texture on this tree stump that he is standing on. You'll also notice that I am using my natural hair dry brush now versus the makeup brush. I want something I can be a little rougher with, and that's what I am doing. After I'm done, I take the green brown and I use that as my highlight color for the roots. And once I get done with all of those, I'm going to take this burnished red, which is a speed paint, and I am going to paint the tree stump. Because of the dry brushing, I've already created highlights and midtones, and by using this speed paint, it's going to tie all of those colors into a nice uniform piece. And then finally, I'm going to take this hardened leather speed paint and I'm going to go over all of the roots. And I made it a point to have the tree stump and the roots be different colors just to help them stand out and give them a little bit of individuality compared to everything else, because it is a lot of brown that is making up the base. Now it's time to paint the tombstones, and I'm going to use this neutral gray triad. And starting off with the darkest one, I'm going to go through and I'm going to really be heavy-handed in applying it to the tombstone and the little broken piece of tombstone that is also there. From there, I go into my mid-tone. I'm going to be a little bit lighter with it, still kind of driving it in, but just starting to pick out all the edges and make things start to pop and create some shadows. And then finally, I'm going to use the bright neutral gray, and I'm very lightly going to go over all the edges and pick them up and pick them out to really create something that looks like stone. Once I was happy with it, I finished off the other little part of the tombstone and moved on to painting the symbiote that is in here. And to do that, I used this satin black because it has a bit of a sheen to it, and I'm going to be glossing everything later. The wetter it looks, the better it's going to be. So I use the satin black, and I'm going to use a lot of satin black on this model because there is a lot of symbiote that is going to need attention here. But I go through, I take my time, I paint all of the pieces and move systematically bit by bit. Once I was done applying the black, I'm going to take this Liquitex high gloss varnish and I'm going to paint the entirety of the symbiote and just really make sure it is shiny and wet and oozy looking. There are also 3 little bits of symbiote coming out of the ground around the tombstone, and I go through and I airbrush them all with that satin black before going back in with a dark blue color. And a lot of time in the comic books, Venom will have a blue hue to him to kind of represent the black and the depth of his black. So I will use this dark blue and I will spray it from the top down, again, almost creating a zenithal highlight, but it's just to give that homage to Venom. Also make sure to put some around the base of the tombstone on the symbiote there as well. Continuing on with the satin black that we were using before, I am going to go through and I am going to paint all of the little symbiote trails that are running around Carnage's body. This was a very time-intensive task because there are a lot of lines to paint. So I encourage you to put on some headphones, listen to some music, listen to a podcast, do something to kind of occupy the silence around you while you do this, because again, it takes a while. It's fairly mind-numbing because you're not doing anything too intensive here. This again is a fairly simple model to paint and you can get it done fairly quickly, but the most time-intensive part is going to be painting all of this black. Now, the sculptor made it very easy to pick out where the black symbiote pieces were. They are very smooth in comparison to the very textured red parts of Carnage. So it's easy to kind of pick them out, but sometimes things might start blending in together because of all the red work that you've already done. So kind of map out where you're going to go with your black in advance instead of just kind of running your brush all over the place. Now, because this is a very chaotic and dynamic looking character, if you do go outside the lines, that's not going to be a big deal. Honestly, it'll feed into the aesthetic, but try not to make anything too wild or egregious that would look unnatural in comparison to this very unnatural character, which is a weird thing to say. When it comes to his head, make sure to paint the entirety of his eyes black as well. We'll come back in later and put some white in there, but for now, just make sure to paint them entirely black. His teeth are black, the drool running down his chin is black, and then he's also got some of those symbiote tendrils running up the back of his head and little specks popping up here and there. Once I was finally done with the black, I'm going to take this dark ivory to paint in his eyes. And I am going to use a very sketchy way of painting here because I want there to be some texture and I don't want it to look super smooth and super clean. So I sketch the white in and I will go and make multiple passes, building it up, making it brighter and brighter towards the center and towards the top, just to create a bit of a natural shadow and some depth. Once I was done, I gave him a quick look over and decided that I wanted to increase the size of the black border around his eyes, so using the same sketchy movements, I went through and retraced his eyes with the black. Once I was done with that, I poured some of that high gloss varnish that we used on the symbiote around the base, and I am going to apply it to his eyes and to all of the black that I had done earlier. Now, I am not applying gloss to the entirety of the model for a reason. I think less is more in this case. So for the red, before I applied the black, I did a semi-gloss varnish over everything. And because I am only being very minimal with the black, I think it really helps sell that wet symbiote look. All done with that, I am now going to take this murder scene color that we used before, and I am going to paint his tongue. Once I'm happy with that, I am going to use an Army Painter Air paint, which is just their airbrush paint, and I'm using this in Carmine Red, whatever that means, and I'm going to spray it from the top and maybe a little bit on the sides just to blend everything together. Look at it, think it looks okay, slap it in his mouth, and call him done. And there you go. That is how I painted Carnage. An incredibly simple model to paint just based off of the simplicity of his design only being red with black accents, but honestly, still incredibly dynamic. There's still a lot going on here despite the simplicity of the color palette. So I hope you got something out of this video today. Maybe you learned a new trick or learned that less can be more, or maybe you didn't learn anything. And if that's the case, I'm sorry. Better luck next time. And so speaking of next time, I'll see you then. Later.